college football playoff chaos is not theoretical anymore. It is coming. It's on the horizon. You can see it as sure as you can see the skyline of Nashville when you're coming up 24, driving back from Athens last night. It's going to be here. The only question is how chaotic will it be? Who'll be involved? Who'll be victimized? But it's coming. It's unavoidable. Now, I want to say something. I'm going to say this once, and I'm going to let it be. I didn't want this. You all who have followed the show a long time, you know I didn't want it. I was very happy with college football remaining the way it had been, because even with the way it had been, I've never defined the value of this sport, nor the games in the sport, by how much playoff significance was riding on them. I've just loved the games because they're the games. I love fall Saturdays because they're fall Saturdays. I never even needed a national championship game. Now, many of you will disagree with this, which is fair. I'm in the vast minority here. I'd be okay if we just played conference championship games and that was it. I don't even need a national championship because it's not like pro sports to me. But most of you disagree, so we have it the way we have it. But I want you to remember one thing, because it's very important for the context of where we're about to go over the next few weeks. You'll remember when the 12-team playoff announcement came, I didn't fight it. I fought it up until that point, but once it became official that we were going that direction, I made a promise on the show. Many of you will remember this, and I said, you will not have to listen to me relitigate this. I'll not do the I told you so. It is what it is. We're headed where we're headed. Most of you wanted this. I didn't get my way, but the majority got their way. That's fine. But then what I said was, I will not have one toe in the water with this new format. I'm diving in. And so I didn't necessarily want to move into this neighborhood, but since you guys made me move into this neighborhood, I want to have the best house in the neighborhood. I didn't want to go down this road, but since you're making me go down this road, I'm going to go faster than anyone. So I'm going to be at the forefront. And so I'm all in. I'm fully embracing it, even though I didn't want to be here. And that means being honest, and that means being truthful about what's happening. The SEC is the best conference in this sport by a wide margin this year. There are probably no elite teams in the SEC, which has fooled some people into thinking the league is down. No, what you have is you have no teams in what we would classically define as Tier 1. You got over half a dozen of them in what we would define as Tier 2. It's a very, very deep and competitively balanced league this year at the top of it. And then you've got your usual also-rans, but you've got insane depth in the league this year. I've watched all of these teams in person. I've gone across the country this year. I've seen the other leagues. There is nothing comparable to what's being played week in and week out in the SEC right now. You cannot tell the truth about this without being accused of SEC bias or SEC homerism, to which I respond, how would you fairly stack teams right now in a merit-based ranking system and not have it loaded with SEC teams? And it always devolves into this abstract nonsense and name-calling, and hardly anyone ever gives you a logic-based, tangible response because you can't. Because your eyeballs and the basic data and even just common sense will not allow you to refute the simple point that there are way more really good SEC teams than there are collectively teams from other conferences this year. That doesn't mean one of them is going to win the title or anything like that. Maybe they will. Maybe two of them will play for the title. I don't even care how it ends. But when we're talking about seeding the playoff, we're going to have a mess on our hands because we only got 2 regular season games left with these teams. And so, South Carolina right now is the 7th best team in the SEC. They'd probably go win the Big 12. So there's a very dishonest conversation going on right now. One of the dishonest labels is the label of Power 4. P4 is the label that you put on the SEC, the Big 10, the ACC, and the Big 12, and we are supposed to continue to pretend like the same caliber football is being played. And a win is a win, and a loss is a loss, and 10-2 here is equal to 10-2 there, and it's not. It's not at all. I had one of my close dear friends tell me earlier today, the SEC and the Big 12 look very similar. No, they don't. There is a Grand Canyon's difference in the caliber of football being played in these two conferences. And they said, well, Josh, look at the top. It's really, really muddy and competitively balanced at the top. That's not the same thing, man. That's like where I grew up. There's a dirt track called East Alabama Motor Speedway. That's like saying East Alabama Motor Speedway is kind of like the Daytona 500. Well, there are cars that go in circles there. That's about the long and short of comparing East Alabama Motor Speedway to the Daytona 500. The caliber of ball being played in the SEC this year is light years different than the collective caliber of football being played in the Big 12. 10-2 in the SEC is not equal to 10-2 there. The conference champ from this league is not equal to the conference champ in that league. There are people who don't like that will argue against it, but they're not arguing against the sound logic of it. They're just arguing that they don't like that's the way it is. And guess what? I don't either. I don't either. I never wanted to go here. I never wanted playoff expansion. I never wanted conference realignment. I never wanted the death of the Pac-12, so much so that I used to wear a name tag that said Pac-12 Pate. I didn't want any of it, but it happened against my will. So what I said was, since this is the way it's going to be, I'm not going to lie about this stuff. It was very easy to see when the SEC added Texas and OU, and then the Big Ten made the moves they made, that the caliber of football they were going to play was going to be much different in quality than the caliber of football the other conferences played. That's exactly how it's played out. I think the Big Ten's a little down this year, but I think in future years the Big Ten will be talked about just like the SEC is being talked about right now, and it'll be them and it'll be everyone else. So this coming month is going to determine to a large degree how the future looks. To remind you, we have a 12-team playoff this year. We have a 12-team playoff next year. After that, nothing is decided whatsoever. There are look-in clauses. There's the ability for these conferences to drastically alter this thing if they want to. My theory on all this is the SEC wants to blow it up. My theory is they are waiting. They're almost daring that committee to leave one of their teams out in lieu of another team from another conference so that they can reasonably say, you know what, we did things the way you wanted to. One of our member institutions got screwed. We are so much better. We are so much deeper. We're so much more committed and invested than the rest of you. We recruit better than you. We pump out more NFL draft picks by a mile than any of you. We've got a higher caliber product. It's not being respected by the committee. We're gone. We're going to go do our own thing. It's my theory the SEC wants to do that. And they are looking for a reason. They are trying to reverse engineer their excuse to leave and do what they wanted to do all along. And it may be given to them. Because a couple of weeks from now, we'll be sitting there after Conference Championship Saturday, and it will be Selection Sunday. And at high noon Eastern, you'll hear Reese Davis and that panel there on ESPN. They'll seed that bracket, and you'll have Ward Manuel, the playoff committee chair, come on and give the reasons why or why not a fifth SEC team was included and how they measured the SEC teams against the other teams. And it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. I just want to pose a scenario for you in a couple of minutes that could explain how muddy this could get. Indiana's going to be a problem. Indiana plays Ohio State this weekend. It's my opinion that if Indiana loses that game, they shouldn't be included in the playoff, the final playoff, the 12-team playoff. And the reason is because it's not their fault their schedule is so soft this year, but it's not anyone else's fault either. Indiana is one of very few teams that would ever find themselves in this situation. Being from the Big Ten, your conference schedule will normally take care of any of this. It just so happens Indiana's conference schedule is not good this year. And here's how not good it is. If they lose this Saturday, and they are a double-digit underdog at Ohio State, if they lose, they will have, their best win will be against Michigan, and they will have played the bottom 6 teams in the Big Ten. Their out-of-conference schedule will consist of FIU, Western Illinois, and Charlotte. There's no meat on the bone. There is no resume there. You get your shot. It's almost like the way we used to talk about Boise in the vintage Power 5 G5 days. These G5 teams that everyone thought was good, but they had a garbage schedule relative to the big boys, they'd have like one power team on there. And everyone understood, okay, they've got to really perform well against this one power team, and that's their only shot. Indiana should never be in that situation, but because the Big Ten's league schedule has let them down this year, they're in that situation. So that's not their fault, but it's not my fault either. If Indiana's 11-1, let's say they lose close Saturday. If they're 11-1, there are differing opinions out there. I think the committee's going to leave them out in the cold. But not everyone agrees with that. A lot of people think there'll still be room at the table for Indiana. If there's room at the table for Indiana, I am telling you, mark my words, if Indiana gets in over a fifth SEC team, and the reason is, well, Indiana's got one fewer loss than that SEC team, all hell will break loose. And in that particular scenario, I wouldn't even blame the SEC. But in an overarching scenario, it's going to break loose somewhere for some reason. And it remains to be seen how I'll fall on that based on what it is. But a few of these games, just look at these games. Notre Dame plays USC at the end of the year. They play Army this week. They got 2 losable games left. Those are going to be door openers. Because right now, Notre Dame's comfortably in this thing. They probably have a home playoff game if they win out. If they lose another game, they are out. You are also going to have those SEC folks in that league office that watch Notre Dame have the freedom to lose to Northern Illinois at home and not have to expose themselves to a conference title game, and they just cruise right on in there, and they're going to have a problem with that if a one-loss Notre Dame takes one of their spots. Why? Because Notre Dame's only got one loss. Now, Notre Dame's going to fire right back and say, hey, you see this game at the beginning of the year? We went into one of your places and won. And to me, that'll be the nail in the coffin because they're not wrong about that. Notre Dame's got a valid argument there. South Carolina at Clemson is going to be another one. I don't think that South Carolina's argument has much oxygen, but if there is going to be some 3-loss team out there that has an argument, it will be them. And if they go into Clemson and win, that'll be, Jesse, I think we counted it up in our own internal numbers, that'll be half a dozen wins over top 45 teams and a few of them over top 25 teams. But the other thing to remember with South Carolina, one of their losses by 2 at Alabama. Another loss was when Sellers went down in the LSU game, and they still almost won, and officiating was very shaky there. Like, their only loss. Nah, that doesn't make sense. They're all losses. But their only definitive loss, their emphatic loss, was Ole Miss. South Carolina's going to sit there, and they're going to make a bunch of good arguments about the strength of schedule, and they're going to make a bunch of good arguments by saying, well, if we exposed so-and-so to our schedule, what would they have done? All that is hypothetical, and it's useless, but it still is emotion-based, and it will be thrown around. Well, what if South Carolina's final act is a 34-10 win at Clemson, and they close the season just red hot? You know what's going to be said. And lastly, and this is the game that's most important, Texas at Texas A&M. Okay, so right now, Texas has the inside track. Texas is still the slight favorite to win the SEC. Texas is that team in the SEC with the softer schedule. They've got one loss. Their final regular season game will be on the road in Kyle Field. It'll be an environment of the year. If Texas goes in there and loses, they may very well do that. If they go in there and lose, and the rest of these games play out as we think they will over the next 2 weeks, the SEC will be sitting there at the finish line with half a dozen 2-loss teams. The tiebreakers at that point, I don't even know how it would work. I know Bama would be in against somebody, A&M maybe, I think is the way that would work. But nevertheless, think about that playoff picture. Those are 6 deserving teams based on your own criteria, based on the way you built the structure. Those are 6 deserving SEC teams. It will not matter to them if they get 5 of 6 in. It will not matter if they get 4 or 5 in. They will focus on the one that gets left out. It'll be what everyone talks about. They'll probably have some valid arguments, and if you don't fulfill their wish, they will immediately start to take action to find their own way of doing things. That is how this works. I don't like it. I never wanted to go down this road, but we're here now, and I think you're being a little dishonest if you don't acknowledge that's probably the way that's going to go. I appreciate you guys watching this, though. Make sure you subscribe to the channel.